We're going to move on into our last topic, though, and you might be thinking, if you're listening to this on Blog Talk Radio, you might be thinking, well, wow, guys, this is about the time you're getting about 50-some minutes. You're usually wrapping up shop at this point. No, we got one more to go. That college football playoff discussion took a little bit of time, but we needed some things that we need to get off our chest. But we got one more topic for you guys, Brandon, the big news coming out of today. And for those of you who might be confused, you might be saying, well, hey, guys, isn't this an onside kick type of a topic? I'm letting you guys know right now, kind of pulling the sheet back, letting you guys in. Me and Mark are going to have too much playoff race stuff to talk about in football that this was a perfect week to kind of fit this in right here on the Primetime Podcast. But Leonard Fournette is going to the NFL draft. He will bypass his senior season to go to the NFL draft. And Brandon, before we get into where he could go, will he be a number one pick? I got to just ask you this. Is this the right move for Fournette to forego his senior season and go to the NFL?
I don't know at this point if it is. And I'm saying that because he's going and he's headed to the NFL after a season that was really kind of a down season for him. And he had a lot of nicks and dings, and he was out for a couple of games and things like that. I don't know if it's the best time for him to go, or if it's the better decision to go there. Because of that, he doesn't want to stay in college another year where something terrible could happen and he doesn't get any money from it. So I think that maybe that's what he's thinking, but I don't know. I think coming off of, if you look at the last two seasons, it would have been really nice if he could have switched them around and could have had this season last year and last year this season. So I think that right now, personally, I would say maybe not the best decision, but I think I could see where he's coming from with the thinking of, I just want to try and get to the NFL, get on a team, be a top 10 pick, hopefully top 15 for sure, and get some money, get paid, and kind of be safe in that sense. I get that. But his play this past year, I don't think garners him coming out when he could have another season and really do well. But I think because of his injuries this season, I think that's possibly what he's thinking.
Well, to me, the big thing, I totally understand why he is coming out, because it's exactly what you talked about. Not only was he dinged up this season, but coming into this season, what every single conversation was, ESPN had Mel and Todd going back and forth talking about this when we brought up draft conversations, was, should he sit out his junior year? People were actually saying, hey, maybe he should sit out his junior year so he wouldn't have any more wear and tear on the tires so that he could come to the NFL a little bit fresher. Well, obviously that didn't happen. He finished the season with 123 attempts, which was down from 300 last year. He obviously played less games because he was out a few, but still saw his load lessen, I'll say, this year. Maybe thinking about that draft a little bit, but I can see what he's saying. He's saying, hey, why stay a senior year on an LSU team that, to me, isn't it would be different if LSU finished 5. If they were like a college football playoff contender, maybe Fournette would stay. Maybe. But at a running back position where he sees a ton of workloads over the past 2 years, over 400 carries, that's a concern, especially for someone who's been injured. And I'm going to throw someone else that we've seen already declare for the NFL draft before Fournette. It's kind of like if you look at Deonta Foreman, the junior running back from the Texas Longhorns. He had a season where he had 323 carries this season, decided to go to the NFL draft. And that's the big thing with running backs. It's workload. Because the more wear and tear, it's just like tires on a car. The more wear and tear you have on that body, the less it's going to do in the NFL. It's not going to have that same kind of a strength unless you're like a freakish athlete, not freakish athlete, but a freakish healer, I'll say, like Adrian Peterson, who can tear his ACL, come back the next year, and then almost break records left and right. So from that point, I can understand why Fournette is saying, hey, let's go to the NFL draft. Let's get our money now, because I'll be honest, I look at the top 5 right now, and this could obviously change, but after week 13, you have Cleveland, who they win a game and actually they got to win 2 games because they'll have a lesser strength of schedule than the Niners. They win a game, though, and we could be in a discussion for the Niners maybe getting that number 1 pick, but I think Cleveland's got that secure. Then you got the Niners at 2 right now, Jacksonville at 3, followed by the Bears, and then the New York Jets. And there, to me, are 2 teams in this group of 5 that could easily take a running back, and that's the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
The Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars at this point could take a number of any positions, actually.
You play football? Cool, come on.
Yeah.
That's basically what they need, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that he probably could go, and certainly in the first top 5 picks. But you got to assess everybody else as well, too. And I think that once you're kind of set and settled on everyone that's going to be coming out and taking a look at all of them, and it's more than 2. And I'm not saying anything for these guys, but I'm saying, what do they do off the field? What do they do on the field? How are they in both areas? I mean, these teams, except for the Cleveland Browns, I think, all look at, kind of the character of the...
I think Hugh is going to look at character, though, the Wolverine.
Hugh will, yes. I'm just saying the Cleveland Browns as a franchise typically, certainly in the last couple of years, have not really looked at, how good of a person or how healthy of a person you are and, mind, body, spirit. But I think that we have ourselves an interesting player in Leonard Fournette, a guy who has had ups and downs with his playing, but a guy who, when he's playing well, man, get out of the way, because he's just gonna run you over and keep on going. So I'm excited for him. I think that the NFL will probably treat him well, especially if he can stay healthy. I think he will be really good.
It all comes down to this to me, and it's like you said. If he could just flip last year and this year, top 5 pick guaranteed. We're having the same discussion about him that we were having this past year about a running back who's done pretty damn good and is probably going to be a Pro Bowl or maybe even Rookie of the Year in Ezekiel Elliott. Where if I just pulled up their stats. Leonard Fournette last year, this year was a down year, but if we look at what he could be, which was last year, he had about 11 more carries than Zeke, and Zeke went on to the college football playoff too, so you got to put that into consideration. 11 more carries than Zeke in less games. He had more yards, 1,953 compared to 1,821. He had about 0.2 more yards per average, which to me, fuck it, you're in the same ball game. You're getting about 6.5 per carry. Good enough. You're in the same ballpark. And then you look at the most important one, touchdowns. He had 22 compared to Zeke's 23. To me, those two, a little different. One's up here, one's down here. Same kind of stat line to me overall. So if he had that season this year, like you said, when they flipped him, we're easily saying Fournette's a top 4 pick. And we're talking about who's going to take him and where is he going to go, like Dallas last year with Zeke. But the big thing, like you said, and I say this with every draft conversation, especially this early in the year, I tell you guys, it is early. It is still early. So many things can happen. Off the field issues. We could have a combine where he has a poor performance in the combine. He could have a poor performance in his pro day. We can find out that one of the injuries that he was nursing this year isn't fully healed, and there's more there than we thought. Now, are we wishing stuff like that to happen? God, no. Why would you do that? But it's one of those things where it's so early in the draft process to where this is like a preliminary discussion is what I usually say. And if I'm looking at it from that standpoint, those barometers, Brandon, of this is a preliminary discussion, and let's say, for sake of argument, the 5 teams, the top 5 that we have right now, end up being the top 5. Cleveland, San Fran, Jacksonville, Chicago, and New York. I think he goes to Jacksonville. And the reason why I say that is the Niners have Carlos Hyde. They're not going to draft a running back to overtake Carlos Hyde. The Bears, I feel like, should be happy with Jordan Howard and should say, hey, we don't need to waste a pick on Leonard Fournette if he falls there. And the New York Jets have Matt Forte. I mean,
don't say that because
Matt Forte's getting old.
But he is old. It's not he's getting old. He is old for a running back, and he is definitely declining. You can tell that. Hold on.
Jets might need a quarterback.
Hold your horses. The Jets need a lot of things. but here's the thing too, is that one, the Jets have Ryan Fitzpatrick, Bryce Petty, and that other guy from Penn State,
Hackenberg,
who's I don't think anything good.
So he's a Hackenberg.
He's a hack. I think that you have 3 quarterbacks, but basically you don't have anybody.
Yeah.
And then
don't forget Geno.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I did forget him because the guy comes in and he's like, oh, I'm ready to play. Boom, I'm hurt.
Punched in the face.
Yeah, so my fault there, Gino, for getting you, buddy. But so you got four quarterbacks, all of which you probably don't want to have.
Yeah.
But Bryce Petty, I think they still think they have something, and in Hackenberg they really don't know. So I think that they're not going quarterback. Running back, you can see that Matt Forte is getting older, and and the Jets know, and the reason being, why is that, Ricky? How much have they used Bilal Powell this season?
True.
They use him all the time, sometimes in a couple of games this season, more so than Forte, and he wasn't even hurt.
Mm-hmm.
They could definitely go with a running back and use Bilal Powell how most likely they want to use him, as that third down receiving back. That's when Bilal Powell, I think, is at his best, and I could certainly see them going running back.
Let me ask you this then. With the Jets and you saying could go running back, do they get the chance, though? Would Cleveland or Jacksonville pass up on Fournette?
Cleveland could, just because of all the different issues that they've had. I think that Cleveland, too, they may be happy with Isaiah Crowell. I don't know. They've seen some good things out of Crowell this season. I think that, they've got Gary Barnidge. They've got... Do they need someone on the defensive side? Do they need to go with another cornerback?
That's what I think.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they may go. Did they go Jabril Peppers at number 1?
No. Wow, I'm pulling out an oldie that I don't think I've used in a while, but the way I see it is they have to go defense. I don't care if it's Jabril. The guy that I would pencil in at number 1.
Not pen, though, because pencil you can change.
You can change that. The guy I would pencil in at number 1 right now is either one of 2 guys, and it's really pick your poison. It's either Jonathan Allen at Alabama or Myles Garrett at Texas A&M. Pick your pass rusher.
You need both.
Whichever one you like. You like Garrett because he's a freak athlete. You like Jonathan Allen because he plays for the juggernaut in Alabama. Is a pretty stud on that Alabama defensive 7 is what I'm trying to spit out of my mouth. Take whichever one you want. The Niners, I think they go quarterback. I think Chip Kelly thinks that, hey, you know what? I'm not taking this Oregon job for nothing. I got to get a guy that I can rely on. He'll probably go maybe Deshaun Watson. Then it gets interesting with Jacksonville because this is the last gap, the last blockage before the Jets. Because like I said, the Bears have Jordan Howard. The Bears can be happy with Jordan Howard and take Jabril Peppers. But I think the Jaguars look at it and go, you know what? We've went defense the last 2 years. We have Dante Fowler. Then we went ahead and took Ramsey with our first pick last year. Well, first pick for them, not overall. And then you look at the running backs they have, it comes down to, are you happy with TJ Yeldon and what he's been able to do?
No.
And the answer is exactly, I wish this was a video podcast because your reaction was great, Brandon. You started shaking your head. And no, you're not. Chris Ivory, I know, has had a kind of weird season this year where he hasn't been what they've expected because he hasn't been on the field for as many games as Jacksonville would hoped. And I'm not saying that's his fault. I'm just saying that's what it is. I think the Jaguars go, hey, we need somebody to come in and help Blake Bortles on the ground and take some pressure off of him.
But I think that Jacksonville, I don't know what it was, but Jacksonville in the offseason, they got, I think, really scared and believed that they needed to go for the next best thing then at running back. Mm-hmm. They went with Ivory, and as much as Chris Ivory, I think, did well in his last season with the Jets, they overpaid for him big time. They gave him like $33 million, and that's probably $23 million too much. I mean, probably about a 2-year, 3-year, $10 million deal probably would have been just fine. But you gave Chris Ivory a lot of money. You invested a lot in him. Mm-hmm. How do you eat that contract then and draft a running back? I mean, that would look a little... It wouldn't look suspicious, but it could because you already invested so much money in him last year. But you have to remember, too, Gus Bradley's probably not going to be the coach.
Yeah, he's probably not going to be there anymore. But another thing why I think... I'm gonna use the phrase they could get away with it for 2 reasons and this is my last point. Besides Jalen Ramsey and Fowler Jr., last year they also took Miles Jack, who they expect to be a prominent figure in their linebacking core. And also it just comes down to look at where they play. They play in Jacksonville. You got a guy where you're thinking like, you know what, he's had a heavy workload. What do? Give him a warm place to play. Give him a warm place to play. Won't have to deal with the snow that often. I mean, when the team relocates to London, it'll be indoors, so you won't have to worry about the snow there or the rain there. So, and that was a joke, by the way, people. I don't think Jacksonville's actually moving to London, but I think they can get away with going with Leonard Fournette with the 3rd pick. But really right now it's, if I had to say, is Leonard Fournette the number 1 overall pick, I'm going to say no. Brandon, I will push it over to you for your final thought of, is just the question of, will Fournette be number 1 overall to the Browns?
No, I don't think so. I think they have a different need, and honestly, it may be quarterback, it may be defense. They have a different need than running back, I think.
Well, and this is where you guys come in. Let us know down below what you guys think of this and actually anything that we talked about today on the podcast, because, Brandon, it's over. This was probably the longest podcast we've had in a while, but it was a doozy. And before we wrap up shop and I give you the Patreon and all that, what are your final thoughts?
Well, Ricky, of course, it's got to be about college football. And it is with the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are the bar. That is the bar. You want to see if you're a good team or not? You compare yourself to the Alabama Crimson Tide. And my thing is, other teams, they have to try and get there. We've talked about it, all throughout this podcast. I've talked to it with a number of my friends. I've talked about it with all the guys here on MVP. I really think that other teams need to go out. They need to get the style that Alabama is playing. They need to try and get the coaching. They need to try and do all of these things because right now, Alabama is uber dominating college football. And what are other teams going to do? What are they going to do? I know that we've had talk that LSU is going to try and bring over Lane Kiffin. That is ridiculous if Lane Kiffin were to do that. I don't think Lane Kiffin should leave anytime soon with Alabama. He's doing outstanding. He's a big part of why Alabama is the way they are right now. But other teams, they have got to look at Alabama and go, what do we have to do? We have to build and have a great defense. We've got to build and have a good offense. We've got to make sure that we have a lockdown defense. That's really what it comes down to, because with Alabama, you look at the LSU game, they won 10-0. Shut out LSU, only needed 10 points. You only needed about 1.
Mm-hmm.
But they still got the win because of their defense. Ultimately, if you want college football to be, more exciting, more fun, more dramatic, you need to have more teams built off of what Alabama is doing. So just reach out and talk to Nick Saban. Maybe he'll give you the ingredient for success. Or maybe he'll say,
probably not.
Try and beat me.
But the one thing I do want to throw in about that is Sean sent us a text today, and Brandon doesn't agree with it, where I guess that if you took the ratio of votes that Alabama and Washington got in the preseason, it's a 3-to-1 ratio. The Warriors were up 3-1. The Cubs were up 3-1. Sean's saying Washington's going to upset Alabama because it's a 3-1 lead. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but it's something for Sean to lean his head on, trying to keep some optimism going into that game. And just as we're finishing up this podcast, Brandon, it has just been announced that Jonathan Allen, the defensive lineman from Alabama, is your Nagurski Trophy winner for the best college defensive player this season.
Well, congratulations to him. Well-deserved. Well-deserved on Alabama defense. I mean, he's been one of the huge anchors for that defense and why they've been so good this season.
Like I've said, one of the best players in that already great defensive front seven. But this is where you guys come in and let us know down below anything that we talked about today. You can follow us on Twitter. All of those are down in the description. Make sure to check out our Patreon page as well. You like the podcast, you like our videos on YouTube, you want to help out the channel even more, check out our Patreon page as well. I want to thank you guys for checking out the Primetime Podcast this week. We will see you next week. But as always, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this MVP podcast. Follow us on Twitter @MostValuablePod for more great podcasts.